Freedom Hill. This is a fictional book. It is about the time in California's history when it was admitted as a free state, but it still had a Fugitive Slave Act agreement where you could go into the state of California and capture escaped slaves. See that hill over yonder? That's Freedom Hill. Around these parts, everybody knows how it got the name. The story's what you might call local famous. That's not to say everybody believes it. No one's one thing, believing's another. The whole business started with two little girls called Rosabelle and Sophie. They lived hereabouts back in Gold Rush days. One was black and one was white, and the pair of them smart as whips. I reckon they got friendly because they were both outsiders. Rosabelle on account of her color, and Sophie on account of her religion. Hers was the only Jewish family in town. Now, Rosabelle had freedom papers, but her mama didn't. Miss Violet was a runaway slave. Seems some abolitionists from up north raised enough money to buy one person's freedom, and Miss Violet stayed a slave so her child could be free. Sometime later, Miss Violet took Rosabelle and hightailed it to California, found herself a likely wagon train with folks who cared more about gold than freedom papers. Out in California, the buying and selling of human folks was purely against the law. Trouble was, they had this thing called a Fugitive Slave Act, meaning runaways who got caught could be shipped back to their owners. That's why the slave catcher came, and that's where the story of Freedom Hill truly begins. The catcher was a regular bear of a man with hard eyes and a disposition to match. He caught Miss Violet working in the boarding house kitchen, grabbed her in a tick right in the midst of stirring up a mess of beans and greens and bacon for the boarders' supper. When Rosalie saw the catcher take her mama, she ran straight away to Sophie's house. The family was getting ready for their Sabbath supper when she came knocking. Soon as Rosabelle told them what had happened, they commenced to make a fuss over her. Mr. Kagan said she should rest, and Mrs. Kagan said she should eat, and all the Kagan children scurried to make a place for her at the table. Sophie gave her a handkerchief to wipe away her tears. "We'll think of something, Rosabelle," she said. "Don't you worry." Come sundown, Mrs. Kagan lit candles and said a prayer in a language Rosabelle had never heard before. Sophie called it Hebrew. Then everybody wished everybody else a good Sabbath and got down to the business of eating. There was chicken soup with vegetables from Mrs. Kagan's garden and a loaf of braided bread called challah. The Kagans didn't exactly ask Rosabelle to stay with them. They just acted like that was how things ought to be. Come bedtime, they put her in with Sophie. The two girls lay side by side, covers pulled up to their chins, talking a regular streak about how to save Miss Violet. The best way they could figure to help Miss Violet was to buy her freedom, and that cost a plain fortune. The only way they knew to get that kind of money was digging for gold. So that's what they took a mind to do. Folks surely did laugh when those little girls went into the hills with their pans and picks and shovels. They started out just watching prospectors at work. Next thing anybody knew, they were washing rock and soil in their pans, swirling and twirling until everything was gone but the gold. In 2 days of trying, Rosabelle and Sophie ripped their clothes, bruised their knees, and scraped their knuckles, all for less than a half an ounce of gold. "This'll take forever," Sophie wailed, but they didn't have forever. The slave catcher was moving through those hills, chasing after slaves the way other men chased after gold. He kept Miss Violet locked up in his old patrol wagon. Afore long, he nabbed a half-grown boy, then headed off chasing somebody else. Once they got that wagon full, the catcher would haul everybody away. There'd be no knowing Miss Violet's whereabouts if that happened. Mostly because nothing better came to mind, the girls went to see Mr. Tompkins at the assay office. He was the man who tested and weighed everybody's gold. Folks said he knew the hills better than any other living soul. Mr. Tompkins had a fine idea. "You young uns ought to be looking in narrow gullies, piddly squatting caves and such, places so small grown folks pass 'em by." The girls thanked him kindly and went off to look for tight little places that grown-ups might have missed. They found plenty on that hill back of the assay office. Sophie shinned into a crevice so narrow she near got wedged halfway down. Rosabelle poked into a harmless-looking cave and found herself staring into bright, glowing eyes of a fox. Rosabelle screamed, the fox barked, and both of them tore out of that cave like a passel of wildcats was clawing at their heels. Sophie fell down laughing. "It's not funny," Rosabelle said, but next thing she knew, she was laughing to beat the band. When she was all laughed out, she crawled into the cave again. "Sophie," Rosabelle yelled, "I think I found gold. Come see." Sophie scrambled into the cave. "Sure looks like gold to me," she said. It was gold, all right, a big gleaming chunk of it, and there was more running all through a vein of quartz rock. The girls dug up the nugget that very afternoon and took it to the assay office. Mr. Tompkins said the chunk was big enough to buy Miss Violet's freedom right by itself. Now he said, "Let's file you a claim." "What's a claim?" Rosabelle asked. "It's a piece of paper says you two own yourselves a gold mine. That's the way of things hereabout. You find it, you own it." Rosabelle and Sophie jumped up and down, hugging and squealing and laughing all at the same time. By morning, the news was all over town. It spread so fast that the girls didn't have to go looking for the slave catcher. He came looking for them. Right in front of the assay office, he stopped the wagon and unlatched the door. The prisoners stumbled out, all of them wearing shackles, all of them dazed by the sunlight. Miss Violet came first with the half-grown boy behind her. Then came a lady with one blind eye, a man with whip scars all over his back, and a young woman near her birthing time. Aside from being a mite thinner, Miss Violet looked none the worse for wear. Rosabelle hugged her and Sophie hugged her too. Then the three of them busted out crying. The slave catcher unlocked Miss Violet's shackles and ordered the others to exercise themselves. They moved in a circle, round and round, leg irons clinking and clanking with every step. The girls looked at those people, and then they looked at each other. Neither one of them said a word. They just knew. Rosabelle took the piece of paper out of her pocket. "Mister," she said, "we'll give you our claim to free the rest of these folks." Well, sir, people stood around thunderstruck, probably wondering if they'd heard right. That day, 5 slaves went free. A catcher went from hunting slaves to hunting gold, and a whole town learned a thing or two about what matters in this old world of ours. So, that's how Freedom Hill got its name. Leastwise, that's the story. As for believing or not believing it, well, reckon you got a right to decide that one for yourself.